That was a day when Mr. Walker had been on the face of it on his own at the material time and would have had the opportunity of killing Mr. Platt and disposing of the body without anyone else discovering about it.
On day 8 of the trial, it was Albert Walker's turn to take the stand.
When Albert Walker went into the witness box, it was obviously something of an electric moment.
They weren't sure whether he was going to give evidence, and I hoped and prayed that he would, because I thought to myself that if he gives evidence, people will see him for what he really is. When he was on the stand, he was very confident, very charming again, charming to the judge, very relaxed. Mr. Davis, he was the Mr. Davis that I knew.
Albert Walker obviously had a problem in presenting his case because he had to accept that he was a man on the run who was using a false identity. But at the end of the day, he had to accept that and essentially said, well, yes, I've done things that I shouldn't have done, but I wasn't the murderer.
He admitted on the stand that Ron may have been murdered, but it wasn't him. You know, there's no way it was him. So he thought he would get away with it.
And he gave his explanation for the evidence of Ron Platt's blood on cushions in his yacht.
He said that Mr. Platt had in some way knocked his head during the course of an incident on the boat, but that had nothing to do with anyone falling off the side of the boat, let alone a murder.
But for once, Albert Walker failed to convince his audience. The jury took just 2 hours to find him guilty of Ron Platt's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment.
When I heard the verdict, I felt relief. I felt elation. I was so happy that he hadn't got away with it.
But Ron Platt's murder had so nearly remained undetected.
Albert Walker was extremely close to getting away with it, because the chances of trawling up a body within 7 days of it having been put in the water in an area not very often fished was extremely remote.
Had it not been for the Rolex watch with its unique number on Ron Platt's wrist, had it not been that the anchor by chance was picked up, had it not indeed been for the fact that an officer went to a wrong house by mistake and discovered that Albert Walker was using a false name, the police would simply have closed the inquiry, said we found out who Mr. Platt is, and that would have been the end of the matter.
Albert Walker's trail of deception and false identities had fooled most people most of the time.
I still find it hard to believe that someone that could be portrayed to be such a nice, kind person could have done this. In fact, I know that there are people that don't believe it, that still refuse to accept that this has happened. It's like, oh, it can't have been him.
He was good. He was very good, doing all that he did and passing himself off here. I don't know anyone who I've spoken to here who had any particular doubts about him.
I found it very difficult to reconcile the Ron that I knew and was fond of with the man that was in the dock, the man that they were saying all these things about. And it wasn't that I didn't believe that he was guilty, as indeed he was proved to be. It was just that I couldn't reconcile those two people.
In February 2005, Walker was returned to Canada to serve the rest of his sentence.
In all the time that Walker was in police custody and during the trial, he has never shown any remorse for what he's done to Ronald Platt. And I think to this day, he still shows no remorse.
He used me as a front for his business, betrayed my trust, and ultimately he murdered somebody that I cared very deeply about and spent a lot of my life with. And you can't forgive that, can you? It's just pure evil.